Well, hey there, guys. I'm Axel the Beast, and this is the Curiosity Shop, the ZeldaEngine.net video mailbag where I answer your Zelda questions. Alright, first question comes from the JCD9876. If the Zelda series were to have a crossover with another series, which series should they pick? No, but in all seriousness, I imagine you mean things like, what's been going on with the Pokemon series like crazy recently, which is like the, Pokemon with Fushigi no Dungeon, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, or Pokemon with Nobunaga's Ambition, Pokemon Conquest, and Pokemon, well, you get the idea, Pokken, etc. And now we get this with Hyrule Warriors. I imagine you mean things like that. I don't know if I have a specific series. I like that practice. I think it's a cute way, not the only way by far, but a cute way of calling on other people's expertise and making pretty decent spin-offs in various other game types and genres. And you know me with spin-offs, love them. But I think that, if it were me coming up with it, I wouldn't be taking that road at all. There's a lot of ways you could go with splicing Zelda with another genre or another game or another franchise, for example. And I think if I had to pick one, I would pick Metroid. I'm a big fan of the Metroid series. Super Metroid was my first video game, after all. But also at the same time, I've actually played a demo of an in-progress fan game that I don't think ever got finished called Castle of Ganon, which was a platformer Zelda, which I believe was going to be kind of like Metroid. And I just think it's a cool idea, exploring a Zelda-style world in a fairly similar game type, but as a platformer game and with gathering items to progress forward through the world. I think that could be really interesting. I'd love to see something like that. And it's not just speaking as a Metroid fan. Not just that. I promise. That or Pokemon. So we could collect all the awesome monsters in the series. Stormageddon747 asks, what do you think about Nintendo's hardware gimmicks with Zelda? What do you think it will be in the next Zelda title? So I don't think Zelda's had too many of these. I mean, Nintendo certainly has had a billion of these, but I think Zelda's actually been on the tamer side, except in some of the more recent years prior to the most recent batch. So that was the DS titles with the dual screen, touchscreen stuff, and then there was the motion controls with Twilight Princess and Skyward Sword. You know me with Skyward Sword. We've been over this. With Twilight Princess, I actually prefer it with the GameCube controls because I feel like the game was designed with that in mind. I feel like that's the kind of game where the motion controls are just proxies for button presses, whereas in Skyward Sword they actually respond to your movements to some extent. The DS games, however, I actually really like a lot. I'm actually a pretty big fan of Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks. I'm not a big opponent of that stuff. And like I said, I think the series has been pretty tame with it in general. I'm not even that against gimmicks as long as they're well handled. People use that as a buzzword to imply, badly designed mechanics, but I don't think it has to be. I think sometimes there are really good gimmicks. As for the next Zelda title, I think they've been dialing it down, honestly, because Breath of the Wild and A Link Between Worlds sort of had it, but it was like, you turn into a 2D thing, and then you can kind of see the 3D Link to the Past. It's sort of 3D. And then with Breath of the Wild, the hardware gimmick is that you literally collect a Nintendo Switch, and all of your key powers are part of it. That's pretty much it, other than motion control. I don't think there's going to be much one, though. Hylian Evan asks, if you were to make a Zelda game, who would be the main villain, and what would this plot or story be about? Well, you know me, I've been talking about, I keep saying you know me, but you know me, I've been talking about my fan game concepts back when I first became a Zelda fan recently, and so obviously I've got a lot. They range from evil sorcerers who've come to Hyrule from other lands to study the Triforce as, creepy scientists, not to make a wish. They range from an ancient follower of Majora who wants to harness it was Gomez, that mini-boss that looked like the Grim Reaper from the Stone Tower Temple, okay? And he wants to harness, because I made him into the main villain. Of course I did. And he wants to harness the primeval darkness under Termina, which is the woods from the beginning. It's fan game stuff. Obviously, I might pick something a little more put together if I was going to make an actual Zelda game. And I think, honestly, I'd do something back to the basics. I'd like to see Ganon. Not Ganondorf, and not Calamity Ganon, who is a pig cloud. And not the Godhead Ganon from Twilight Princess either. I'm Ganon, the pig guy, as a big monster, wizard with a trident. Back to basics. It can have a great story, but let's get rid of the gimmicks eating my words there. Gimmicks of time travel and magical instruments and fight Ganon, save the kingdom. There can be a great plot, but make it simplistic in concept. That's what I'd like to see. Something like A Link to the Past, basically. Ancient Poe asks, what elements would you like to see in a hypothetical Zelda JRPG? Example elements, characters, story, combat, mechanics. So I don't have a lot of crazy ideas on this. This is something you guys should weigh on in the comments, because I'm not a big JRPG guy, or at least not until sort of recently. But like for mechanics, the only thing I can kind of come up with is like the idea of inventory or item management. A lot of JRPGs have, you have equipment and like magic spells and things like that, and certainly it should have magic spells. Zelda games, normal ones, should have magic spells, but I think that emphasizing like collecting items and using like consumable type things, or not necessarily consumable but rechargeable items, things like that, some kind of inventory and stock management element, I feel would be a little more Zelda, because there's collecting items and using them to traverse and solve problems, etc. That would feel, I think, pretty cool in a JRPG and bring a little bit of a Zelda vibe to it. Other than that, the main thing for me is actually in the storyline. I think it's just like the thing they can do with spin-offs, and ones that are very different from the Zelda series, and in a lot of ways JRPGs are, is to explore the kinds of events and stories you can't easily do in Zelda games. Now, JRPGs have some free roaming elements, and since it's a Zelda JRPG, it obviously should have some of that. But also, it's a good way to explore heavily plot-heavy things and sequences of events, political stuff, wars, kinds of stuff that maybe Hyrule Warriors could have touched on, but it kind of didn't, unfortunately. Events from the franchise's history that we can't easily see in a game where we're supposed to adventure. Things like that. So I would say the big thing I'd like to see is to explore stuff that the normal series can't easily touch on. Hand of Pharaoh asks, do you think that if Nintendo releases another Breath of the Wild-like game, or at least one with climbing mechanics, that there should be more bosses that share similar traits to Shadow of the Colossus bosses? Granted, there is the Taluses, but more larger bosses that you climb on. Granted, it fits the game as a whole thematically, of course. Well, that is the most important thing, but I'm not too into the idea, but I'm still traumatized. I used to write boss guides for a completely different Zelda website for the Wind Waker, and I realized how much I don't like that game's bosses. The Wind Waker and Twilight Princess are great games, and they have their fans. They're my least favorite Zelda games, and they have a lot of huge bosses. And I think that they're just awkwardly designed, and it bugs me. It makes me wary of the idea. Granted, you can have greatly designed giant bosses, but I think some aspects of it, they're so big you have to find an Achilles heel to figure out a way to hurt them, which is common anyway. Contributes to weaker boss design a little bit. It doesn't have to, but it tends to. So I'm wary of the idea and traumatized. So sure, they'd have to do it right, though, and I feel like not every boss in the game has to be like that. You get some size diversity, I liked Skyward Sword because, okay, it didn't have that much diversity. They were all big, but at least the mini-bosses were tiny, and at least the bosses weren't, like, skyscraper big. They were, like, your house big. It was a little manageable. R2D93 asks, Breath of the Wild's development heavily focused on breaking the Zelda formula and challenging series conventions. In terms of future Zelda games, would you like Breath of the Wild to become a basis for the new Zelda formula, or should Nintendo continue to break conventions further? What did Breath of the Wild do right that you wish to see in future Zelda games, and what could you do without? So I definitely wouldn't want it to become the next the Zelda formula. I like Breath of the Wild a lot. I haven't completed it, so I'm not going to give a definitive answer here still. I'm sorry. But, there's a lot of things about it. It implements so many things that I've spent my entire career on Zelda Dungeon saying that Zelda games should have. So you'd think it would be, like, the best thing ever, and it's very good. But I feel like there are definitely some shortcomings. And I think for me, it just comes from they took it all the stuff that I think everyone was talking about, free roaming, more towns, blah, 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 and just ran with it so much. The idea was to break conventions, but I also think that at the same time they decided that they were just going to get rid of all of it. And I feel like it's a very good experimental game, and I think that there's a lot of lessons to be learned from it. The free aspect, a lot of the character customization stuff, there's a lot of interesting stuff in the game, and I'd like to see most of the things in Breath of the Wild really put forth in more Zelda games. But I'd like to see a little bit of going back to what was really cool about Ocarina of Time, A Link to the Past, Majora's Mask, you know, those games, and bring back a little bit of the structuralization, I guess is what I would say. Breath of the Wild is an amazing game, but it needs a little bit more structure for my tastes, at least. Give us back the dungeons. Let us, gate certain things off to make the decisions of where you want to go a little bit meaningful. It's like, okay, I want to go there. How do I get there? How do I need to get there? Things like that. Don't do that for the whole game. Don't make it linear, but, create some branching paths. I think that's interesting stuff. And make some open games in the future, like Breath of the Wild, sure, but let's not have them all be quite like that. Not all of them. All right, so for our last question, Hunter, who submitted a similar thing, just with different categories before, so this might be a pattern, I'm not sure, asks, so what are your favorite Zelda games in these categories? Side quests, characters, world, and items. So, for side quests, it's a hands down to Majora's Mask. There's just so much cool stuff. I mean, the time cycle in general contributes to this, but there's just so many different things you find about all these. In any other Zelda game, most of these characters would be insignificant, but they all have their own side quests. They all have their own stories. It's great stuff. It just builds them in ways you can't imagine, honestly. Or you can imagine. You get my point. And just the side quests themselves are so varied and interesting. It's just a great way to explore the world. As for characters, it's going to be Majora's Mask, but tied with Skyward Sword, I think. Because Skyward Sword was awkwardly trying to do what Majora's Mask was doing. It didn't succeed, per se. But what it does succeed at, I think, is dialogue and, emotional building of the characters. It has great characterization, and it's a very colorful cast. So I feel like in Skyward Sword, it matches Majora's Mask, but in a different way. And a close third would be Breath of the Wild, which is just impressive that the characters feel so much like characters in Breath of the Wild, even though there's so many of them across such a big world. As for whatever the other ones were, world and items. So world is an awkward one for me because the worlds of the Zelda games have never actually appealed to me in extremely big ways. I feel like, okay, so one I might pick is A Link to the Past because I love the Dark World and stuff. Or maybe Majora's Mask because I love the Icona region. But, that's the thing. As I mostly would pick areas, not entire worlds. Maybe I'd pick Majora's Mask just because I love Icona so much, but, So, you guys might have to give me that one in the comments. I did like the Deku region, too, actually, now that I think about it. Maybe it's Majora's Mask, I don't know. As for items, that's a weird one for me because it's Twilight Princess, I think, if I had to pick. Twilight Princess has a horribly underused roster of items, but there's so many cool ones. The Gale Boomerang is an interesting spin on the boomerang. The Ball and Chain is awesome. The spinner is so fun in the moments when you use it. It's just so sad it's not used more. The Dominion Rod is incredible in one dungeon and never again. I could keep going. There's just so many cool items in that game. It's just there's so much creativity, I think. So much genuine okay, so we don't have a magic meter. What are we gonna do with all the? Let's just go nuts, go nuts with the items. That's what I feel like they did, and I think they succeeded. It's some cool stuff. So that's mine. All right, guys, that's it for this time. And I prefer to get your Zelda questions in email form, but if you want, you can row, fight the power, and send them to any of the contact information in the description. I don't really care that much. It's fine, whatever. And I'll see you guys later. Red Goron asks, why in the Wind Waker did the Rito live in Death Mountain? Why did the Gorons leave it? This is the thing. Zelda worlds just aren't, they don't world build them enough. I can't answer the complicated questions of the real estate market in Hyrule and the Great Sea and what effect the flood would have had upon the market. And, there's just so many